You've insulted me, and you've insulted this company with that bastard creation of yours.
When the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979, the CIA, again, taken totally by surprise. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, the CIA, again, taken by surprise. Go all the way back to 1949, when the Soviet Union exploded their first nuclear bomb. The American intelligence community had no idea that was coming. They were taken by surprise. 30 years later, when India set off their nuclear bomb, the CIA totally blindsided. They did not foresee Iraq invading Kuwait in 1990. They did not foresee the attacks of September 11th, 2001. But of course, after 9/11 happened, they were not part of getting at the truth about Iraq. They were part of the pretext in Iraq. They were part of the false story. They were part of what was not true about Iraq, not what was actually happening there. The CIA may be good at a lot of things.
I like it!
Then the next year, in 2008, the CIA did it again. August 2008, Russian troops rolled into the nation of Georgia to brush back the Western-minded leaders of that former Soviet state and to support pro-Russian separatists inside the nation of Georgia. Again, in 2008, the CIA, completely surprised, had no idea that was coming.
I like it!
When Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, the CIA and therefore the U.S. government had no idea it was coming. And now, in 2014, the CIA, once again, has done the exact same thing. Or rather, not done the exact same thing. They're surprised again. Cry me, huh?
I like it!
So the CIA missed the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, 9/11, Iraq, the Soviets go nuclear, the Indians go nuclear, the Russians invade Georgia, and now the Russians invade Crimea. And there are maybe a couple of different lessons to take from this track record. One is that for all the things we are good at as a nation, the United States is not very good at spying.
I like it!
Which is about the last time the CIA was completely surprised by Russia invading somewhere, when they invaded Georgia in 2008. That was when George W. Bush was president. You'll remember John McCain, running for president at the time, said, "We are all Georgians now." John McCain is now saying, "We are all Ukrainians now." It's kind of his thing. It's just what he says. But there was significant international and specifically American upset when Russia invaded Georgia back in 2008. Russia not only sent troops to cross the border into another sovereign country back in 2008, they waged a war. They waged a week-long war between Russian and Georgian forces. It was a shooting war. This was not just some tense standoff. And there was much international outrage and bluster about that act of aggression by Russia in 2008, that projection of force, that illegal incursion into another country that didn't want them there.
I like it!
Now it is 6 years later, 6 years after Russia did that. And you know what? The Russian troops are still there. They're still in Georgia. The pro-Russian pseudo-separatist enclaves inside Georgia that Vladimir Putin decided he was going to bolster with Russian troops, those Russian troops are still there. Yes, John McCain has moved on from saying we're all Georgians. The world happily decamped to the Russian city of Sochi for the Olympics without protests about those troops that Russia has left inside Georgia. Countries, including our own, were outraged when Putin did what he did toward Georgia back in 2008. But then, over time, we lost interest.
I like it!
Of what Russia does. That is foreign enough and unknowable enough to us that we consistently, over the decades, are completely blindsided by the things that Russia does, even when they do them on a very large scale. Also, though, that world is different enough to us that it is, I think, hard for us to sometimes stay focused on it. We lose interest. They care about what they do a lot more than we care about what they do. The Russian logic of invading Georgia was this. They knew they were going to be getting some international opprobrium, right? They knew they were going to upset people by invading Georgia back in 2008. But their calculus was that they could bear the international criticism for doing it. That their desire to occupy parts of Georgia was stronger than the level of interest and outrage that the world could maintain about that question. Is that also the calculation with Russia having invaded part of Ukraine? It worked for them in 2008. Is that the same calculation they're making now? That we can't possibly care as much as they care about what they've just done. They'll stick it out and we'll forget it.
I like it!
Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, And nobody quite knew what to make of it when she reportedly finished a long telephone call with Vladimir Putin a couple of days ago. And then after that call, she picked up the phone again to call President Obama, because she wanted to tell President Obama that having spent a whole lot of time on the phone with Vladimir Putin, she wanted President Obama to know that, in her opinion, quote, Vladimir Putin is in another world. She said he didn't seem like he was in touch with reality. In another world. Now, was that just how he seemed to Angela Merkel in that conversation? Was he just being particularly weird or loopy to her for some reason? Was she saying that strategically to try to influence something about how the West was behaving toward Russia in this international crisis? What did that mean for her to say that Putin sounded like a space cadet when she talked to him on the phone about what he was doing in Crimea? Well, today those questions were largely settled when Mr. Putin held a long press conference in Moscow in front of the cameras and was a space cadet to everybody. He showed the world the behavior and the bizarre logic that, frankly, freaked out the German chancellor enough that she had to call President Obama to talk about it. The headline from longtime Russia watcher and reporter Julia Yaffe in the New Republic on this today was very much to the point. Quote, Putin's press conference proved Merkel right. He has lost his mind. Putin squirmed and rambled and wrangled and rambled. He was a rainbow of emotions, flustered, confused, so confused. And now here she's quoting or paraphrasing Mr. Putin. She says, Viktor Yanukovych is still the acting president of Ukraine. But Mr. Putin can't talk to Ukraine because Ukraine has no president. Ukraine needs elections, but you can't have elections because there's already a president. And also, no elections will be valid. Huh?
I like it!
He also suggested that the protesters who had been shot by police snipers in Kiev had shot themselves. The opposition protesters had arranged those shootings themselves in order to make the government look bad. He then also suggested that actually America had orchestrated the whole thing. Quote, sometimes I get the feeling that these people in America, they're in their laboratory doing experiments, like on rats. The Washington Post today called this a strange and rambling press conference. They quoted Mr. Putin claiming that no Russian troops have actually invaded Crimea. No Russian troops have crossed the border. He says, quote, you can go to a store and buy a uniform. Were these Russian soldiers? No. They're just well-trained local self-defense forces. President Obama responded to that claim today by saying of President Putin, quote, I don't think that he's fooling anybody.
I like it!
But whether or not President Putin is out to lunch, whether or not he really is trying to fool anybody, whether he's just saying patently, obviously untrue things as kind of a one-finger salute to the rest of the world and the world's media, his worldview, his bizarre explanation of what he says he's doing, of what he says is going on in Russia's corner of the world, it isn't just a Rorschach test, right? It isn't just a psychological exercise about how two different ends of the telescope make the world look like two very different places. These two totally different understandings of what is going on in the world, one from Vladimir Putin and one from everybody else in the world, these two very different perspectives on what's happening there are manifesting on the ground.
When I was at RT, I was begging them to send me to Egypt, and that was the big thing then, right, with the Arab Spring, and I couldn't get them to send me, so I was really jealous when, after what went down, you were offered, a personal escort from Putipu through Crimea, and he was going to lead you around on horseback, right, and let you see what's really going on the ground there. Why would you turn down such an invitation?
Well, I didn't get invited. I got told that I was going. I woke up to a statement saying Abby's getting shipped to Crimea as if I was an object, put it in a box, shipping it over to Ukraine. So, there was a lot of factors there. I woke up to the statement. I didn't want to have the circumstances. I told my boss, I said, look, if you give me a couple weeks war training, make my own contacts on the ground, I would reconsider. But I just felt like I didn't want to take the chance of it being a vetted experience because I see how the Green Zone treats journalists.
Dog and pony show.
Yeah, it's a total joke. And I didn't want to take that chance to go over there and be like in a vetted PR experience with like Russian troops telling me like, no, everyone loves us. And so